I used to believe my life was perfect. Everything seemed to fall into place exactly how I'd dreamed. I had a husband who was kind, charming, and devoted. Or so I thought. Ethan was the kind of man who made people say, "You're so lucky." He was thoughtful, always remembered little things, and had a way of making me feel safe. We had a comfortable home, steady routines, and a love story that looked flawless from the outside. Every morning, he'd kiss my forehead before leaving for work, whispering that he couldn't wait to see me later. Every evening, he'd come home smiling, asking about my day as if I was the center of his world. For years, I believed him. For years, I believed in us. But sometimes, perfection is just an illusion carefully painted over cracks, and those cracks eventually find a way to show. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of peaceful day where nothing feels wrong. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, warming the counter where I was making breakfast. Ethan was upstairs getting ready. I was humming to myself, flipping pancakes, and thinking about what we might do later. Maybe a walk, maybe a lazy day at home. Life felt ordinary, safe, predictable. Then, his phone buzzed on the counter. A simple sound, one I'd heard 100 times before. Usually, I never paid attention to it. Ethan was protective of his phone, almost too protective, but I never questioned it. Trust was supposed to be the foundation of marriage, right? That morning, though, something inside me shifted. A small, quiet instinct whispered, "Look." I tried to brush it off, but the feeling didn't leave. My hands moved before my brain could stop them. The screen lit up with a message preview. 14 simple words that would change everything. "The kids can't wait to see you tonight." At first, I thought I misread it. I blinked, looked again, hoping I was wrong. The kids? We didn't have any kids. My stomach tightened. My heart thudded in my chest like a warning. I hesitated, staring at the screen. I shouldn't open it. I knew that, but I couldn't stop myself. My fingers moved, and suddenly the phone was unlocked. He'd forgotten his password. It felt like the universe had opened a door I wasn't supposed to enter. The messages flooded my eyes. Photos, conversations, memories that weren't mine. There he was, Ethan, smiling, laughing, holding a little girl in his arms while a boy clung to his leg. A woman stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. They looked like a family. They looked happy. Each photo was a punch to my chest. Birthday parties, trips to the park, dinners. The timestamps stretched over years. Not days, not weeks, years. He hadn't just made a mistake. He'd been living another life. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. The room around me began to fade. The sizzling sound of pancakes burning on the stove was distant, muffled, like it belonged to another world. All I could see was him, his smile, his lies, his secret life unfolding in front of me. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped the phone. My thoughts screamed, "This can't be real!" But deep down, I knew it was real. It was happening. The man I'd loved, trusted, shared my soul with, had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I couldn't tell. I just sat there, frozen, staring at the screen until the phone went dark. My breath was shallow. My body was cold. But inside, something else began to rise. Not rage, not tears. Something colder, sharper, determined. Then I heard his footsteps upstairs. The familiar sound of his shoes on the hardwood floor. I quickly locked the phone and placed it back where it was. I turned off the stove, ignoring the burnt smell that filled the room. My heart was pounding so loudly that I could feel it in my throat. He walked in, freshly showered, smiling like nothing had changed. Something burning. He asked casually, his voice warm, easy. I forced a smile. "Just breakfast gone wrong," I said, trying to sound light, normal, alive. He chuckled, poured himself a cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter. I watched him, studying every detail, the curve of his lips, the sparkle in his eyes, the ease in his voice. It was almost terrifying how natural he looked, how effortlessly he wore his mask. As he took a sip, I realized I was looking at a stranger wearing my husband's face. He asked about my plans for the day. I don't even remember what I answered. My mind was too loud. Every second, my thoughts repeated that same sentence. He has a family. He has children. He's been lying to you all along. He kissed my cheek before leaving, and that touch, once comforting, felt like poison. As the door closed behind him, I exhaled for the first time. My legs gave out, and I slid to the floor. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the clock. And in that silence, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Not while he still had control. If Ethan had secrets, I would uncover them all. Every lie, every hidden truth, every piece of the life he thought I'd never discover. I stood up, wiped my tears, and looked around the kitchen, the place where our perfect marriage had just died. The sunlight still streamed through the window, but it didn't feel warm anymore. It felt cruel, like it was mocking me for believing in something that never existed. But I wasn't going to let this destroy me, not the way he expected. Ethan had spent years building a web of lies. He thought I'd stay blind, obedient, loving. He thought I'd forgive him if I ever found out. He didn't know what I was capable of when I'm betrayed. I promised myself that morning, silently, fiercely, that I would make him face the truth he'd buried. I would expose every hidden piece of the life he thought he could live behind my back. He had a secret family. I had a plan, and before he realized what was happening, I'd turn his entire world upside down. For the next few days, I became very good at pretending. I smiled at dinner, laughed at his jokes, kissed him goodnight, and asked the right questions about his day. I made sure my voice sounded warm and ordinary, the way a wife's voice should sound when the house is full of trust. But inside, I was waiting. Every time his phone buzzed, my heart gave a small, sickening flip. Every time he said, "I'll be late," I watched the clock and made a note. I learned to move through our home like a shadow, present, polite, unthreatening, so he wouldn't suspect I was paying attention to more than just the surface of his life. The clues arrived like raindrops that slowly become a flood. A calendar entry that read, "Client dinner," without details. A receipt shoved under the seat of his car. La Bella Trattoria. 4 people, tucked away as if it were nothing. A child's tooth under the couch cushion. A smear of something sticky on the back seat. A small sweater that smelled like another home. I collected them, like a careful thief gathers coins, cataloging each discovery in my head, and in a little notebook I kept hidden in the drawer. Date, time, place. I photographed everything. I saved screenshots. I turned the mess of betrayal into evidence, because chaos is useless when you want justice. When I asked him about the receipts, he shrugged and said, "Work thing," with that same easy smile that used to make my heart relax. I let him have that small lie. If I reacted, he would tighten his story, erase the breadcrumbs. I needed the breadcrumb trail to be complete, and I needed him to keep walking without knowing I was following. So I played my part. I asked about his day and listened as if I believed every word. I held his hand at night and pretended not to notice the way he checked his phone twice before falling asleep. Curiosity became a low burning pressure. I found myself wanting to know details, not to punish him immediately, but to understand the shape of the life he had built without me. I started to track his movements, not recklessly, carefully, as someone who knew the stakes and was determined not to give him the chance to cover his tracks. I learned his routes, the parking lots he favored, the coffee shops where he lingered. I memorized his patterns until following him felt less like a betrayal of my own marriage and more like gathering the final pieces of a puzzle. One afternoon, I followed him. My palms were slick on the steering wheel, my breath shallow, every instinct in my body telling me to turn back. But I stayed. He drove through streets I knew and streets I didn't, past familiar shops and into a quiet cul-de-sac lined with neat houses and small front yards. He pulled into a drive and walked up the path to a house where the curtains were slightly drawn. A woman opened the door, arms wide, and then two small children spilled out behind her and ran toward him yelling, "Daddy!" They crashed into him with the kind of abandon only children have, faces lit with joy. He bent to scoop them up, his smile unfolding in a way I'd only ever seen on family photos from his phone. He looked like the father in those pictures, a presence I'd been denied without knowing it. I stayed in the car until the moment when the sun slid behind a cloud and the streetlights blinked on, until the woman and children had gone back in and the front door closed softly. I didn't cry in that driveway. I sat very still, feeling my knees weaken, but keeping my hands steady. The imagery of them together burned into me, not as accusation, but as confirmation. This wasn't a single mistake. It was a parallel life, lived with ritual and routine. That night, I started building my case. I printed the photos I'd taken, cross-checked dates against bank statements, copied messages, and saved them in folders labeled with neat, decisive names. I spoke to people who might unknowingly confirm his movements. The barista who'd seen him on certain afternoons. The delivery driver who'd dropped packages at that house. Everything that might sound circumstantial alone became powerful when stacked together like building blocks. Revenge in my mind took shape not as a spectacle, but as a careful, unavoidable truth. I wasn't interested in tantrums or dramatic scenes. I wanted him to experience the gradual collapse of everything he'd assumed would protect him. I wanted the comfortable life he'd constructed. Reputation, friendships, the petty respect at the office, to show cracks and then crumble. Because the truth has a way of doing that when it's finally revealed. He had chosen to split his life in two. I would make sure the cost of that choice was exact and complete. There were moments when the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm me. Late at night, I allowed myself to be small for a few minutes, curling into a ball of hurt and disappointment where no one could see me. But those moments passed quickly. They were not plans. They were the salt stinging the wound. The plan was steady and clear. Gather proof, protect myself, expose the reality he'd thought he could hide. The more I documented, the less like a victim I felt, and the more like an architect of my own future. He had learned to lie with confidence. I would learn to reveal with certainty, and so I kept watch, methodical and silent. He called me his wife, and welcomed me home each night with the same casual tenderness, never guessing that the woman beside him held the blueprint of his downfall. He had carved out two lives, and lived them both without care for the cost. Now the balance had shifted. He had made his choice, and quietly, carefully, I was preparing to make mine. The days that followed felt like living inside a movie I didn't audition for, one where I played the perfect wife while secretly watching everything burn. I woke up beside Ethan every morning, forcing a smile that felt like a mask glued to my face. He'd kiss my forehead, mumble something about a meeting, and rush out the door with that same confident air that once made me proud. But now, every word he spoke felt like poison coated in charm. He still thought he had control. He still believed his secret life was safe. But I had already seen the truth. Her name was Lena. I found her through one of the receipts I'd collected. A fancy restaurant, 2 orders of champagne, and a payment through a joint account under his business alias. When I searched the name online, there she was, smiling, radiant, innocent. Her profile picture showed her holding 2 little kids, 1 boy, 1 girl, with Ethan standing behind them, his arms around all 3. The caption read, Family time with my world. I remember the sound that left my throat when I saw it. It wasn't a sob. It was quieter, sharper, like a gasp cut in half. He looked so natural in that photo, like he belonged there, like the life we built was just a side project to his real one. 5 years. That's how long they'd been together. 5 years of lies, stolen weekends, fake emergencies, and holidays where he claimed to be too busy to visit my parents. It all made sense now. Every late night, every business trip, every vague excuse I once believed. I started digging deeper. Lena wasn't just a fling. She was part of his second life. He had an apartment with her in a quiet suburban neighborhood. A place I'd never been, but one that became etched into my mind from the pictures I found. I saw toys in the background, family dinners, a birthday cake with "to Daddy" written in frosting. It wasn't a mistake or a temporary distraction. It was a whole existence he'd built behind my back. But the cruelest twist, Lena had no idea. She truly thought Ethan was divorced. He'd told her stories about a failed marriage, how his ex-wife couldn't move on, how he was trying to start fresh. She pitied him. She believed in him. She trusted him, just like I once did. I couldn't even hate her for it. She wasn't the problem. He was. So I decided to use that. I created an anonymous email account, something untraceable. I drafted the message carefully. No rage, no insults, no emotion. Just cold truth. You deserve to know who he really is, I wrote. Attached were our wedding photos, a copy of our marriage certificate, and a few recent pictures of us at events. I hesitated for a second, staring at the send button. My finger hovered above it, trembling. Part of me wanted to back out, to stay in the safety of pretending. But that part of me had been dying for months. I pressed send. The next 12 hours felt like waiting for an earthquake. I went about my day as usual, though my body was tense with anticipation. When Ethan came home that night, I didn't need confirmation. His face told me everything. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, pale, shaky. His eyes darted everywhere but at me. He tried to smile, muttering something about a long day at work. His hands were trembling when he reached for his drink. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Everything okay? I asked, keeping my tone soft, casual. He nodded too quickly. Yeah, just work pressure. A project went south. You know how it is. I tilted my head slightly, watching him crumble from the inside out. Don't worry, honey, I said, letting the words drip with calm. Everything will come out in the open soon. His fork froze midair. He looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, there was genuine fear in his eyes. His confident mask slipped, just for a second. It was glorious. That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea and waited. My phone buzzed around midnight. A new email. From Lena, she had replied. Her message was short, trembling with disbelief. Is this real? Please tell me you're not lying. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. Yes, I wish I were lying, but I'm not. There was nothing else to say. I could almost imagine the scene. Lena confronting him, the kids watching in confusion, Ethan stuttering and scrambling for excuses. Maybe he tried to twist it around, to make her doubt what she saw. But I knew those pictures would crush his words. You can't talk your way out of a wedding photo. When I finally walked into our bedroom, Ethan was lying awake, staring at the ceiling. His breathing was shallow, his hands clenched. I slipped into bed without saying a word. The silence between us was suffocating. He must have felt it too, because he shifted slightly, opening his mouth as if to say something, but then stopped. There was nothing he could say that would save him. I turned my back to him, my eyes wide open in the dark. My heart wasn't racing anymore. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. He didn't know it yet, but his perfect little world had started to crumble. The man who thought he could live 2 lives was about to lose both. As I lay there, listening to his uneven breaths. I made myself a quiet promise. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. He had already seen the loving wife. Now, he would meet the woman he created. Calm, patient, and deadly precise. The storm was coming, and he was about to learn exactly what it felt like to live in fear of being found out. Ethan's perfect mask was slipping, and for the first time, I saw panic replace the charm that had always defined him. He began coming home later and later, muttering about urgent projects and new clients. But I knew what was really happening. He wasn't working. He was scrambling, trying to patch together the two lives that were crumbling faster than he could control. His voice had lost its confidence. His laughter had an edge of nervousness. And when he looked at me across the dinner table, there was a flicker of fear in his eyes that told me he knew something was wrong, but not exactly what. That was exactly how I wanted it. Every night, I played my part to perfection. I'd light the candles, cook his favorite meals, and pour his favorite wine. I didn't fight, didn't question, didn't accuse. I was the calm before his personal storm, and he never saw it coming. My silence scared him more than any confrontation could. I watched him squirm in that silence, how he avoided my gaze, how his hand trembled slightly when he lifted his glass. He didn't know that every sip of that wine, every bite of that dinner, was part of the stage I'd built for his downfall. I wanted him to feel safe, comfortable, blind, because comfort makes people careless. Behind that calm mask, I was working quietly, efficiently. I had already gathered every piece of evidence I needed. Photos, messages, receipts, and documents. But this time, I wanted something bigger than personal revenge. I wanted exposure. Ethan's entire career was built on the image of being the perfect family man. His company adored that version of him. The loving husband, the devoted father, the man with integrity. He'd built a brand out of lies, and it was time everyone saw the truth beneath it. Before I did anything public, I made sure I was untouchable. I met with my lawyer, filed for divorce, and ensured every legal step protected me. I didn't announce it to Ethan. I didn't even hint. I just signed the papers quietly and moved our joint savings into my account. I had enough proof of his betrayal to justify every decision, and I wasn't about to let him take one more thing from me while he was losing sleep over his mistress. I was securing my freedom, my finances, and my future. One night, while he was pretending to be working late, I sat in front of my laptop and opened a blank email. My heart wasn't racing anymore. There was only focus. I wasn't angry. I was precise. In the subject line, I wrote his name and title. In the body, I kept it simple. To whom it may concern. Attached are verified documents showing Ethan Reynolds' ongoing extramarital relationship, false marital declarations, and instances of professional misrepresentation. Please review before continuing partnership. I attached everything: photos, screenshots, statements, and I made sure it went to the right people: his company board, his PR team, and a few corporate sponsors who prided themselves on family values. No threats, no explanations, just truth. I hit send. By morning, the dominoes had begun to fall. Ethan came home, looking like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. His phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, calls, missed notifications. But he ignored them all, sitting at the table with that blank, haunted stare of someone who finally realizes the fire is real. I watched him without a word. He didn't eat. He barely moved. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "Something's going on at work," he said, like a man in denial. I just nodded and poured him another glass of wine. "I'm sure it'll all come out in the open soon," I said softly. The same words I'd used before, but this time, I saw them land differently. He froze, realizing I'd said that once already. The night everything began. By the next day, his company called him in. The polite tone he'd always used with his bosses turned into defensive stammering. I listened from the hallway as he argued over the phone, his voice trembling, his sentences breaking. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, over and over. But I could hear the disbelief on the other end. Lies have a way of sounding different once they're exposed to light. By Friday, he didn't bother pretending to go to work anymore. His firm had placed him on leave while they investigated the claims. The statement came in an email that began with "effective immediately." It was so formal, so sterile, it almost made me laugh. The man who had once boasted about promotions and awards now sat on the couch in silence, his phone face down, his world shrinking by the minute. The social media pages he'd once filled with pictures of his beautiful family went dark. The sponsors who'd collaborated with him quietly cut ties. His name disappeared from upcoming company events. Meanwhile, I continued with my routine like nothing had changed. I cooked, cleaned, and even asked about his day, the same way he once lied to me. I wanted him to feel every ounce of helplessness I had once felt. The confusion, the loss of control, the quiet humiliation. But this wasn't cruelty. It was balance. The universe was just evening the score, and I was the one holding the scale steady. On Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of him pacing downstairs. Papers were scattered on the table, his laptop open to emails he couldn't answer. He looked broken. Not the kind of broken that comes from pain, but the kind that comes from exposure. Every lie he'd ever told had finally caught up with him. He looked at me as if searching for sympathy, for some small flicker of the woman who used to love him. But all I could offer was silence. He whispered, "You did this, didn't you?" I didn't respond. I just looked at him. Long enough for him to know he was right, and calm enough for him to realize I wasn't sorry. By the weekend, his world had truly come crashing down. His double life was in ruins. Lena had blocked him. His company had distanced itself. Friends stopped answering his calls. And I, the wife he betrayed, had finally taken back every ounce of power he'd stolen. The man who had once lived 2 lives now had none. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Quiet, absolute peace. When Ethan walked through the door that night, he looked like a man who had been chewed up and spat out by his own lies. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie hung loose around his neck, and the confident air he always carried had vanished. The man who once believed he could control every situation now looked utterly defeated. His eyes searched the room as if looking for something familiar, something stable. But all that remained was the silence he had created. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, his mouth slightly open, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. When he finally did speak, his voice was small, trembling. "You did this." It wasn't anger. It was disbelief, mixed with fear and shame. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just looked at him, calm and composed, the same way I'd been practicing for weeks. Then I answered, steady and cold. "No, Ethan, you did this to yourself." The truth hit him harder than any scream ever could. I watched his shoulders sag, his chest collapse under the weight of his choices. He took a few steps closer, hands shaking, eyes glossy with tears. "Please," he whispered, "I can fix this. I'll end it with her. I'll do whatever it takes." His desperation filled the room, but I felt nothing. He was a stranger now. A man I used to know. Someone I had once loved, but no longer recognized. I had already fixed everything the only way it could be fixed. By walking away, he dropped to his knees, begging like a child. But the words no longer had power over me. He said he was sorry, that he made mistakes, that he didn't mean to hurt me. The same recycled lines men like him always used when the walls started closing in. I just stood there, watching him unravel. There was no satisfaction in it, no pleasure, just closure. He was finally facing the consequences of his choices, and, for once, I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. His lies had done all the work for me. Upstairs, the house felt eerily quiet. Every step I took echoed, reminding me how much space had grown between us. I walked into our bedroom, the same room where we had shared plans, laughter, and dreams that now felt like someone else's memories. I pulled out a suitcase and began packing, not in anger, not in haste, but in complete control. I took only what was mine, leaving behind everything that reminded me of him. As I folded my clothes, I could hear him downstairs, pacing, muttering to himself, still trying to process how quickly his empire had crumbled. By the time morning came, I was ready to go. I stood in the doorway for one last look. The house was spotless, but lifeless, like a museum of our lies. Ethan sat at the dining table, staring at nothing, his phone buzzing endlessly beside him. I knew it was his office, his so-called friends, maybe even the other woman, but he didn't pick up. He looked like a man who had lost everything, and in a way, he had. His job had suspended him after the truth surfaced. His perfect public image was ruined. The woman and kids he'd been playing house with wanted nothing to do with him. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done. Completely, irreversibly done. I picked up my bag, walked past him, and he reached out as if to stop me. "Please," he said again, voice cracking. "Don't go." I didn't even turn around. There was nothing left to say. I opened the door and stepped outside. The morning air cold against my skin, but it felt good, clean, honest, real. Before leaving for good, I turned back one last time. I walked into the kitchen, where we had shared countless breakfasts, countless lies disguised as routine. I took out our wedding photo from my bag, the one where we looked so happy, so certain of our future. I picked up a marker and wrote across it slowly, letting each word sink in. "You had two families and lost them both. I had one heart and you destroyed it. Goodbye." I taped it on the refrigerator door, right where he'd see it every day. It wasn't a threat, not even revenge anymore. It was a statement. The truth, plain and sharp. A reminder of everything he threw away for the sake of ego and deceit. I wanted that photo to haunt him, to follow him every morning when he reached for milk, every night when he tried to drown his guilt with another drink. I closed the door behind me and walked to my car. For a moment, I sat there, staring at the house that had been both my home and my prison. It didn't feel like a place anymore, just a shell filled with echoes of lies. I took a deep breath and started the engine. The sound of it felt like freedom. As I drove away, I didn't look back. There was no reason to. The person I had been inside those walls no longer existed. I had spent years building a life around someone else's deception, and now I was finally free to build my own truth. Ethan, on the other hand, would be left to live with his reflection, to face every lie, every manipulation, every fake smile he'd used to keep his double life alive. Some people think revenge is about destruction, but it's not. Real revenge is silence. It's walking away without giving them the satisfaction of seeing you break. It's letting the truth burn them slowly, day after day, and as much as he begged, as much as he cried, I knew he would never recover. Not because I took anything from him, but because he finally saw what he had become. By the time I reached the highway, the city lights fading behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. My heart still ached. Yes, but it wasn't from him anymore. It was from the weight of finally letting go. I rolled down the window, let the wind hit my face, and smiled for the first time in a long time. Ethan's story was over. Mine was just beginning. A month had passed since everything fell apart, and the silence that followed was strange, almost peaceful. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to Ethan's alarm, his rushed goodbyes, or his excuses about late meetings. My mornings were quiet, filled with soft light filtering through the curtains and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. It was my space now, not ours, and that small change meant everything. I had built my days around peace, not pretense. I read books, cooked for myself, even went on walks in the evening, just to feel the world again. Freedom didn't come with noise of fireworks. It came softly, like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. Then, one morning, my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made me pause. Lena. I hadn't heard from her since that night when everything exploded. My fingers hovered over the screen before I opened her message. "Thank you," it began. "You didn't owe me anything, but you told me the truth. It hurt at first, but now I see it saved me. I've moved out, started a new job, and I'm rebuilding my life. I'll never let anyone lie to me like that again." I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Each word sank deeper. It wasn't forgiveness I felt. It was connection. She had been living the same lie, wearing the same blindfold I had. We were both deceived by the same man, trapped in the same illusion. But now, both of us were free, standing on our own feet again. I sent her a short reply, nothing elaborate. "I'm glad you're doing better. We both deserve the truth." That was it. No bitterness, no blame. Just peace. Because she wasn't my enemy. She was just another casualty of Ethan's lies. In some strange way, knowing she was okay made me feel lighter. It was as if the last remnants of anger I'd been holding on to finally dissolved. Meanwhile, Ethan's life had completely unraveled. His company, which had once paraded him as the model of integrity and leadership, suspended him pending investigation. Then they let him go quietly, without a press release or a goodbye message. His reputation had imploded faster than I expected. People who used to admire him now avoided him. Business partners cut ties. Friends disappeared. He'd built his entire identity around being the perfect husband, father, and professional. And now, the mask was gone. The world finally saw him for what he was. I heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances. He tried to reach out to a few of our old friends, but no one wanted to get involved. Even his family distanced themselves, embarrassed by the scandal. I never took pleasure in his downfall, but I won't lie. There was a quiet justice in seeing the truth catch up to him. For years, he had manipulated everyone around him, pretending to be a man of values while living a double life. Now, there was nowhere left for him to hide. One evening, my phone lit up again, an unfamiliar number this time. But I knew who it was before I even opened it. The message was short. "I'm sorry for everything. I know I can't undo what I did, but I hope you can forgive me someday." I stared at the words for a long moment, feeling nothing. Not rage, not sadness, just an emptiness where his power used to be. That was the real closure. I didn't need to respond. He didn't deserve my forgiveness, or even my attention. The best revenge wasn't punishing him. It was living without him. So I deleted the message, turned off my phone, and went to bed with a quiet mind. In the weeks that followed, I started reclaiming pieces of myself I hadn't even realized I'd lost. I began painting again, something I'd given up after marriage because life got busy. I spent weekends exploring places I'd never gone because Ethan never wanted to. I even started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to heal properly. Each session peeled away another layer of hurt until I could finally breathe. without feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. Sometimes, memories tried to sneak in. The laughter at dinner, the vacations, the promises whispered late at night. But those moments no longer belonged to me. They belonged to a woman who believed in a version of Ethan that never existed. That realization didn't hurt anymore. It just reminded me how far I'd come. I met Lena for coffee once, months later. It wasn't planned. We just ran into each other at a small cafe downtown. For a second, we froze, unsure what to say. Then she smiled, and it wasn't awkward at all. We talked for hours, not about Ethan, but about life, work, books, travel. Two women who had survived the same storm, now standing in the sunlight again. Before leaving, she said, "You know, I used to think the worst thing that ever happened to me was finding out the truth, but now I think it was the best. It set me free." I smiled, because she was right. Ethan faded into the background of my life after that. Occasionally, someone mentioned his name, but it meant nothing to me anymore. I didn't care where he was, or what he was doing. Maybe he was trying to rebuild, maybe he wasn't. Either way, he was no longer part of my story. My life didn't revolve around his mistakes anymore. One evening, as I stood on my apartment balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly before me, I realized something profound. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was simply at peace. Revenge had never really been about hurting him. It had been about reclaiming the parts of me that he'd tried to destroy. It was about standing on my own and realizing that I was enough, strong enough, brave enough, and worthy enough of a life that didn't depend on someone else's lies. As I watched the night sky, a gentle breeze brushed against my face. I closed my eyes and smiled. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not because I'd won, but because I'd let go. The war was over, and I had survived. Betrayal changes you in ways you never expect. It breaks something inside, but it also clears the fog, forcing you to see people and life for what they truly are. When Ethan betrayed me, I thought I'd lost everything. My marriage, my trust, my sense of security, all shattered in one cruel twist of truth. But over time, I realized something powerful. Betrayal doesn't destroy you unless you let it. It hurts. It scars. It leaves you questioning your worth. But it also opens your eyes. It strips away illusions and leaves only truth. And truth, no matter how painful, is freedom. I used to think revenge meant making someone suffer the way they made you suffer. I imagined that exposing Ethan, watching his world collapse, would make me feel victorious. And in a way, it did, for a moment. But that satisfaction faded quickly. What stayed was something deeper, a quiet sense of liberation. I wasn't controlled by anger anymore. I didn't need him to hurt for me to heal. I just needed to be done with the version of myself that accepted less than honesty. That was the true turning point, when I stopped seeing myself as a victim and started living like a survivor. Ethan's downfall came fast, and though I was the one who set it in motion, I didn't linger to watch. I didn't need to see him break. I'd already seen enough of his lies to know that whatever he faced next was deserved. What mattered more was how I rose from it. I spent nights alone, staring at the ceiling, replaying the years we'd spent together. I didn't cry out of sadness anymore. I cried because I was finally releasing everything I had held on to for too long. The pain, the love, the disappointment. Each tear was a small act of cleansing. I began rebuilding myself piece by piece. I stopped asking why me and started asking what now. I learned to cook for one without feeling lonely. I redecorated the house, replaced memories with new beginnings. I started taking long walks after sunset, breathing in air that didn't carry the weight of deception. Every small act of independence became a victory. The more I focused on my healing, the less space Ethan occupied in my mind. His voice, once so loud in my thoughts, grew distant, until one day it disappeared completely. The biggest lesson I learned was that revenge isn't always destruction. It doesn't have to be fire, fury, or chaos. Sometimes revenge is quiet. It's peace. It's the ability to smile genuinely again, to love again, to sleep without bitterness. It's looking at the past without wanting to rewrite it. That kind of revenge doesn't just hurt the one who betrayed you. It transforms you. Because while they're stuck in guilt and ruin, you're free. I've seen what holding on to anger does to people. It eats them alive from the inside. It keeps them chained to the person who hurt them. And that's exactly what I refuse to let happen. Ethan took enough from me. My trust, my time, my faith in love. I wasn't going to let him take my peace too. So I chose silence. I chose distance. I chose to let him watch me rise while he fell apart under the weight of his own lies. That's when I understood. Silence isn't weakness. It's power. It's control. It's the kind of revenge that doesn't burn bridges. It builds new ones. Toward freedom. When Lena messaged me, thanking me for telling her the truth, it felt like the final piece of closure I didn't know I needed. She too had been living in the shadow of his deceit. And now, like me, she was rebuilding. Her message reminded me that sometimes speaking truth isn't just for revenge, it's for liberation. It's for the people who deserve to know, who deserve to start fresh without lies clouding their hearts. In a strange way, Ethan's betrayal connected two broken women and gave us both a reason to rise. Even now, when I think back on everything, I don't feel hatred. I feel gratitude, not for what he did, but for what it taught me. It showed me that strength isn't born from comfort. It's born from survival. It's born from choosing to stay soft. In a world that tried to harden you, I learned that no matter how deep someone's betrayal cuts, you can still choose dignity over destruction. You can still rise without sinking to their level. People often ask me if I regret what I did. Sending that email, exposing him, the truth, not for a second. It wasn't out of spite, it was out of justice. He'd built a life on lies, and it was time those lies met the light. But my real revenge wasn't that one act. It was every day after. Every morning I woke up without anxiety. Every night I slept in peace. That's what real victory feels like. Not watching them fall, but watching yourself rise. So, if you've been betrayed, don't waste your energy trying to destroy the one who hurt you. Let karma do its job. It always does. Instead, pour your time, your heart, and your strength into yourself. Because healing is louder than vengeance, and peace lasts longer than pain. Let your silence be your revenge. Let your success be your answer. Let your happiness be the echo that follows their regret. In the end, Ethan became just another lesson in my story. Not the ending, just a chapter. His betrayal may have started my downfall, but it also became the reason I rebuilt stronger than ever. And that's what I want anyone listening to know. The most powerful revenge isn't fire, rage, or chaos. It's rising from the ashes of what they tried to burn, walking away without looking back, and finding peace in knowing they destroyed themselves, while you finally learned how to live.